Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Craig, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the National Building Museum. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the museum and this afternoon's program. Today's program is the fourth in the Community in the Aftermath lecture series. And this series is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Federal Emergency Management Agency in partnership with the National Building Museum. We are truly grateful for their support, and especially to Dana Bress, who is a research engineer with HUD, for helping us coordinate this series. Couldn't have done it without him, so we thank you, Dana. Over the next year, into 2011, Community in the Aftermath will follow the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Alternative Housing Pilot Program, which is a grant program to develop more viable, versatile, readily available, and cost-effective post-disaster housing for the areas affected by Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. So today's speakers are going to be focusing on the challenges of providing housing units and also creating and managing post-disaster community in Bayou La Batre, Alabama. The next program, scheduled for spring of 2010, will focus on efforts in Texas. So if you missed the first two programs of the series, transcripts and audio are available on our website, www.nbm.org. And also, of course, today's audio and transcript as well as film will be available on the website as well very soon. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dana Bress, who will present an overview of the program and introduce the first speaker. Dana?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Dana Bress with the HUD and working in partnership with FEMA. Basically, the Alternative Housing Pilot Program was a congressional initiative to see if we could do, if there were alternatives that would work better to help communities recover more quickly. Congress appropriated $400 million for a grant program that was eligible, with the eligible applicants being the 5 Gulf Coast states, Texas through Florida. 4 grants were awarded in Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. In Bayou La Batre, the project was to build a 100-unit community that was safe and out of the harm's way. It's elevated, about 80 feet elevation. Bayou La Batre happens to have some advantages in the fact that there's some hills there not far from the community, on the northern side of the community. And FEMA awarded Bayou La Batre $15.7 million for the units, site construction, and administration. What makes this project interesting is there was a very strong community commitment. You know, we need to do this, and we need to do it in a safe place. It's built near the school, some new schools. And also, unlike some of the other projects, this one, Bayou La Batre, is a relatively small community. We built 100 units. We basically increased the amount of housing in Bayou La Batre by many %. It's very rare that you could do a project where you increase the amount of housing by 4 or 5 or 6% in a community. And this is good, affordable, quality, new housing. A lot of folks were moved out of really old, housing that was clearly substandard, market rate housing that was clearly substandard, and this provided an opportunity for them. It integrated funding from both FEMA for the construction, as well as the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Development Block Grant money that was awarded after Hurricane Katrina for purchase of the land and some of the infrastructure. And it created a new housing authority for the community to manage these properties, because they are building them for the inventory to help the community well into the future. Today we have 3 speakers. We have Bob Galbraith, partner with Galbraith and Associates, was the project manager for the overall Alternative Housing Pilot Project in Bayou La Batre. Vince LaCoste, principal with Polysurveying, basically who provided the engineering services for both the site work as well as some of the development. And Ken Kvalheim from Mitchell Company, who was responsible for the actual construction of the homes. They're modular homes, construction and installation of the homes.
Thank you, Dana. We work with the weirdest group of bureaucrats that are in this city. These people are so weird that you call them after hours and they answer their cell phone. You ask them a question and they keep working on the question until they actually get you an answer. See how weird they are? It's been a real pleasure to work with this group, and I don't say that just to stroke them, but my father always said roses to the living is better than roses to the dead. And they have done an excellent job helping us work on this project that from the first was a great opportunity for the city, but there also was foreseen that there were risks involved for the city working on a project of this type, developing new housing in the coastal plain. From our building site, and this is a picture of our developed subdivision now. This was 2 big cotton fields to begin with, and we started, they hadn't been cotton fields in many, many years, but we started with 2 blank slates. They were in one place. They were bought right across the street from each other, and we began to put them in there. The picture you see here was taken several months ago. This site is completely developed and has 100 houses and has 100 families moving into that site. Let me tell you a little bit about the city itself. See if I can figure out how to operate this. You see the sign there for Alternative Housing Pilot Project, and we were thrilled to see that sign go up as we started construction. This picture is significant. You see on the left is Curtis Carlton, who's Division Director for FEMA Disaster Planning Group, and beside him is Stan Wright, who is the part-time mayor for the city of Bayou La Batre. Stan is not a little fellow. His girth and size and booming voice were much needed during the development process to keep us on track, and he is a small businessman in this community. He owns what's referred to as an oyster shop, where they process oysters and then they arrive in your city off a big refrigerated truck and go into the restaurants here and are consumed by lots of people all over the country. Stan has a unique ability to condense problems into practical solutions, and he very much knows the people. He was born there, he was raised there, has been a part of that community during the whole time, and he knows each and every just about individual in the town. So it made a big difference in us being able to solve problems and to deal with the issues that arose. Bayou La Batre is the seafood capital of Alabama, and let me tell you something a little bit about this town. It's inhabited by approximately 2,700 persons before the storm. 52% were Caucasian, 10% were black, 32% were Asian, and 6% other races, per the 2005 estimated census figures. The population was reduced by 1/2 after the hurricane, as people had to leave because there was not housing and not a job for them in some cases temporarily. And they left and went other places, but thank goodness many of them have returned, and the population today exceeds 2,000 people. The location of the city of Bayou La Batre presently was the first permanent settlement on that site in South Mobile County. Was founded in 1786 by French-born Joseph Beausarge under a Spanish land grant of 1,259 acres. The common name Bayou La Batre for the settlement was coined from the term Bayou of the Battery, referring to the early French artillery battery located on the west bank of the bayou. The modern city was not incorporated until 1955. Always a traditional fishing village, it grew to become known as the seafood capital of Alabama and also developed a thriving shipbuilding industry, and both of those remain very active today. Bayou La Batre was featured in the 1994 movie Forrest Gump and the book on which the movie was based. In fact, Winston Groom, the author of that publication, went to high school in Mobile and was very familiar with Bayou La Batre, so that's the reason he put it in the book. Then in April 2005, Disney Studios launched a secretly built pirate ship, the Black Pearl, out of the bayou for filming sequels to the Pirates of the Caribbean Curse of the Black Pearl movie. My grandchildren still like to get those movies out and watch them, and they have a great affinity for that. Unfortunately, on August the 29th, 2005, the area was devastated. The hurricane came aboard. You see the path of the hurricane there. We were in the northeast quadrant, which means we got some of the strongest storms and the highest tidal surge. We didn't get quite as bad as Mississippi got because they were closer to the center of the storm, but we still got 1622 feet of tidal surge that came in as far as 1 mile. This is what it looked like from where that boat is tied up to where the Mississippi Sound begins is about 1.25 miles. And it was deep enough to launch that boat, and they used that to go out and find people who were still there in their houses. One little group of folks, a couple that was 85 years old, took their boat and tied it to the front door and stayed in that until the storm was over and they came to rescue them, and how they survived, I do not know. But it was extremely difficult. The winds were high. This used to be steel strand buildings, part of the city docks, and they were washed away by water and wind. And one of the bad things was we had 50 or 60 shrimp boats and cargo boats and other things that were pushed up on the land, some of them as far away as half a mile. And a lot of the buildings there, they weren't in great shape to begin with, but they were totally destroyed by the storm. And of course, what happened was a lot of the housing that was there was rental housing, and these folks wound up in a FEMA trailer. Then there was no place for them to transition to because the owners of that property either could not or would not rebuild because of the new building code being enforced, and also the requirement that the house be elevated to keep the city eligible for flood insurance. Now, given this backdrop, the city launched into a HUD CDBG funded recovery program. These are some of the houses that were built up on stilts. They're concrete, of course, but they're still stilts to replace houses for people that had a house destroyed, where we could get clear title, and as long as the money lasted, we rebuilt houses. These are modular houses that replace what was there. They're very well built and very strong. What you don't see under the ground is like a big concrete and steel reinforced donut that connects all of those piers together, so that the house has a very strong structure that keeps it in place. The vision of the project, which I think is the starting point for almost all this discussion about this, was that the mayor at the time was very adamant that we not have a temporary solution that he couldn't do anything with after the FEMA money and the HUD money was all gone. The question was, can't we build something that's permanent? Can we build stick-built homes out of harm's way? Can we do it that way? Well, you get into a discussion about where and when and environmental issues and cost, and it became very problematic to get to this. But I think the name of this presentation probably should be Home at Last, a phrase coined by Mayor Stan Wright. He envisioned from the beginning of discussions about this project that the end product must serve the long-term housing needs of its citizens, since there would not be another funding source available to address these issues. When the money was gone, it was gone. The short-term stress of families living in FEMA trailers on their home site or being relocated to other areas within the county would be necessary to allow for the development of a long-term housing facility for families in need. We are here today to share the outcomes achieved and lessons learned about the development of the safe harbor subdivisions in Bayou La Batre. I'm going to show you a little video. The video is showing here, somehow we didn't get the sound when we pulled it from the television station, but we got some good news reports. This is a report from a young reporter there who came and tracked a family as we moved them in their new house. This is a family of 5 or 6 children, a mother and a father. You see them picking up some materials here. We provided a living kit for them. Many of these folks came to this new house with 2 black garbage bags that had everything in it they owned. These folks had a vehicle that they could still drive because they took it out of the bayou before the storm, but everything else they had was left there, and they're moving into their new home, and they're so pleased about it. And the point she's making is these folks spent like 1,600 nights in a FEMA trailer with all those children. I cannot imagine that. But they were absolutely pleased. The little boy is telling you he's 3 years old. And the significant part of this is you see the materials that are in the house, the furniture that's provided as part of the package along with the living kit. He's telling you, this is my room. He was actually born in a FEMA trailer. He had never lived in a house until he moved to this one. And he's just as cute as he could be, and I'm sorry the sound has not come up on this, but it does make a point that these folks were definitely in need, and it provided them a new beginning for their families. Learning from the past difficulties with managing temporary housing facilities, the city chose to pursue the AHPP opportunity to develop a new neighborhood of durable, sustainable permanent dwellings out of the flood zone in the northern part of the city that could be annexed into the city, not temporary housing that may not meet the adopted city-state housing codes or serve as a permanent housing for families in need of affordable housing in the future. It's important that we allow families to remain in their ancestral community to continue their employment and the education of their children without relocation if we can possibly do so. Many of the former rental homes were destroyed. There was no place for these people to live except in the FEMA trailer they had. We worked very closely with Robert Ives, who was the TRO director for the state of Alabama, in trying to make this transition as quickly as we could, and there was lots of decisions made up the stream that sometimes conflicted with that. And the mayor says to tell you he was really kidding, Randy. He wasn't going to put your people in jail if they came down there and told the people they'd get out of their FEMA trailer. But I guarantee you he would have. We did work that out, and it was very helpful to the people, although they really lived in a less than reasonable living situation before they got to move to the Safe Harbor subdivision. Encouraged by existing HUD Katrina disaster grant project use of modular construction, which was in the HUD CDBG portion of this project in the city, we knew that the modular construction would be useful, that we could develop it in a small period of time compared to stick-built, and it did work out to be the thing to do. Adoption of modular houses also allow these units to be relocated or reconfigured as required in the guidance that came from FEMA. They wanted to know if we could take some of these houses and move them. We do have 10 units that are movable, and we can relocate them. They're all single-wide construction, but they could be moved up to 500 miles. And the significant thing is, a stick-built house you couldn't do that with, but a modular house is built strong enough you can put it back on a trailer or a carrier and move where you need to move. The details of the project are the city received, as Dana told you, $15.7 million to totally build 100 units. The commitment was to build these and to have them available for rental for low and moderate income families. The resident selection criteria to identify and qualify eligible tenants for the new housing were developed in concert with FEMA. The eligibility criteria gave a priority for families living in FEMA trailer in the city of Bayou La Batre and those families being displaced to other temporary housing by FEMA. The second round of criteria was for families that lived in the area that were receiving benefits or living in a FEMA trailer, and then it went to Mobile County. Today, we still have a list of qualified applicants of 100 families that if there were a house in Safe Harbor, they would move there. And they're still living in sometimes less than acceptable housing situations. Some of them bought their old FEMA trailer and they're still living in it. So we're continually looking for new money to provide some additional housing for them. The invitation to the public meeting to announce the availability of the new affordable housing was created and translated from English into Spanish, Vietnamese, Laotian, and Cambodian, and hand-delivered to every occupied dwelling in the city. We passed these out wholesale to make sure people knew that this opportunity was coming. We posted these at city halls, city library, retail stores, grocery stores, post office, etc. And a public meeting was conducted to discuss this program and give people an opportunity to make suggestions. We provided interpreters for non-English speaking persons, and counselors were available both at the public meeting and later on at our office, which is on site a half a mile from this facility, where people could come and sit down face to face with someone who could help them with the paperwork. An interesting aside, Janie said not to digress, but I have to in this instance. We had a little lady come in and she had a question about her deed. And she said, well, I have a deed on the property I have, am I going to get to keep that? We said, well, of course. She came in with a piece of notebook paper that said, I promise John Doe that if he works in my oyster shop, and this wasn't the mayor, by the way, that for 10 years that I will give him the house and the property he's living in. We said, well, dear, this is not a deed. Well, thank goodness, one of the people we hired to work for us is a lady who retired from the local bank as a manager, and she knew all the family, knew the details, so she went and made the arrangements to get this poor woman a real deed so that when she left the property that she was living on, that it wouldn't disappear, that someone wouldn't come and take it from family or somewhere else. But it's an interesting situations you get into in trying to make this work. We believe, told the recruitment process was useful because the final demography by race of the 100 families living in that Safe Harbor subdivision closely matches the general racial makeup of the city proper prior to the storm. By using the interpreters, and we have several ladies that are there that work, the Lutheran Church nonprofit disaster recovery people have been absolutely fabulous in helping us with interpreting services, and they come night, day, whenever you need them, and they provide a wonderful service to the people in that community. The other part of the process that I'm supposed to talk about is about project management. Project management and team building and all those words that we hear when we talk about getting from A to B are like the weather. Everybody talks about it, but not many people do anything about it. They go through some motions, but it doesn't always work. In this instance, and I need to brag on my wife, these gentlemen will tell you, she is the lady in charge. She does not mind calling you day or night or whenever to get a meeting set up to sit down and work through a problem, and she won't let you leave until you get the problem solved. And she has done a great effort in helping lead that, and then it's been very fortunate that we've had such good people on our team that were willing to suffer that process and help bring their best to the table to make it work in terms of documentation, making lists and checking them off, and going through the process of getting from A to B to get this work done. There were Tuesday morning meetings. That was a sacred time. You don't need to budget anything other or schedule anything else in that time. You need to be there. And it was got to be a process that we all depended on to make sure the project was going to move forward. Another thing is if you need help, ask for it. One of the things, as I alluded to earlier, we were able to go back to our various team members, whether it was with Dana and the Building Science Group or with FEMA and the disaster recovery folks, and ask them for what we needed, and they were just excellent in helping us come up with a solution. Sometimes we'd say, that doesn't work, we've got to do something else, and so they'd help us find the next better solution. We did some things that I think it would be good to build in to the process of these grants in the future. Make a list and check it off. My wife is the world's worst at making me, when I start my day in the morning with coffee with her, beside my little table where I sit to drink my coffee and read my paper is a pad and a pencil. She said, now get your pad and your pencil. And I know I'm going to have two lists. I'm going to have the personal list and the business list to start every day, and I think if we did more of this, we would come to a better conclusion. The Mitchell Company and Polysurveying worked together to develop a master production schedule that included all aspects of the house construction, and that included lots of things like transportation and permits and inspection and that type of things that they're going to tell you about. We established priority zones so that we could safeguard people that we had moved in away from the construction site. If you've ever been on a construction site where there's children involved, you know that's problematic. And because we were transporting big items on carriers and had big cranes and all kind of equipment there, it is a very dangerous situation, or could be very quickly. We did things like Ken developed a detailed list of all the inventory. When these folks moved into their house, they got a living kit which included sheets and towels and dishes and a coffee pot and sheets, pillowcases. I don't remember the whole list. I hauled it all in my Yukon from Mobile to Bayou La Batre, about a ton of it. But we gave them items they needed to set up housekeeping. They signed a inventory receipt for that. They also signed an inventory receipt for the furniture that you saw in the house earlier. So we've got that for the auditors, and we've been audited and got a clean bill of health from FEMA Region 4. Managing the tenant move-in is a tedious process in that they have to go get their clearances and put up their deposits for the utilities, and then working out a situation where they could move in without there being a conflict with ongoing construction was interesting. And then one item that Janie came up with through a woman's eyes, she says, is that she started the blue tape inspection. She got a big roll of this blue tape that the painters use to do trim and etc. And she went into the house and went around and checked to see if there were any flaws available. So then we could move people in, and we would then assure them they didn't have to worry about being accused of doing something to the house if there was a crack or something missing or whatever. And by doing that, it moved us forward by a quantum leap. And so the few things that need to be taken care of, she then put in what she calls the record book of tenant complaints, which is nicknamed the Book of Woe. The Book of Woe is maintained by James Cook, who is our facilities manager, who works for us out of our office. He keeps this list up and checks it off and goes and does inspections to make sure the work's done by whoever's supposed to do it. And every Friday he mails the current list with the current status to all the people involved, so that you have an ongoing list of what's happening and what needs to be done to satisfy our customer and to make sure we preserve the quality and integrity of the house. Some of the things that were done as part of this, you have to make some compromises, and some were made in how we provided the grass and the landscaping. We decided to go with a minimal landscaping so we could provide more grass. There's nothing worse in a subdivision like this than open, muddy areas that can be tracked inside. So we gave up some of the landscaping that we had to provide more grass, and that was obviously the things to do. Keys to the unit, maintaining security of the unit is always an issue. We had the keys ready to go, and we didn't have all our money, and the Mitchell Company let us go ahead and give the keys out and take possession of the houses. We already had the general occupation requirements met, but they went and on good faith let us move into the houses without having their check, which we really appreciate. The city of Bayou La Batre cannot operate an unrelated business enterprise under state law. They can provide services and float taxes and collect money, etc., but they cannot own enterprises. So the question was, how would the city operate and maintain this over a long period of time? The decision that was made then is the state of Alabama statutes contain enabling legislation for organization and operation of nonprofit housing authorities as public corporations. And it specifies how these are to be organized, and that process was followed, and the mayor appointed a 5-member board, and they were confirmed by the city council. and we began operation in conjunction with some guidance and discussions we had with Birmingham, HUD at Birmingham, which is our state office, and they were extremely helpful in helping us move that effort forward. The interesting thing you would like to know is the 5 members of our board are local folks. One is the construction manager for Habitat for Humanity, so she knew about construction. One is a small business owner. One is a school teacher who teaches what we used to call home economics. I don't know what it's called now, but that's what she teaches. Another person is the assistant chief for the police department. Let's see, how many is that? The other person is a housewife, and these people come from all various backgrounds, but they really have done a good job in taking emotional investment in this activity, in that they are requiring people to follow the rules. Everyone signed a lease that had very specific responsibilities. If you get in a situation where you have domestic violence and conflicts with the police, then that causes your case to be reviewed by this board. And so it has brought some integrity to this system and has made a very peaceful and a very productive place for our families to live. The outcomes and lessons learned, the 3 significant outcomes of the Bayou La Batre AHPP project can be summarized as: first, 100 local families have moved from temporary housing to permanent, safe, affordable housing that is not in the floodplain, not in the high velocity wind zones, and they will not become storm victims after the next hurricane seeking federal help. This was an area of the world that only 8% of the families and businesses there had flood insurance. That has changed drastically. The mayor has been very adamant. He asked people, have you bought your flood insurance? You know, and that has been very helpful to get them to do that. Second, the safe harbor subdivisions shall serve as a stepping stone to new opportunity for these families as they rebuild their lives. Many of them historically have been in this area for generations. One of my employees was asked by one of the federal visitors, Rocky, how long have your people lived in Bayou La Batre? He said 236 years. That's a long time to be one place, but these folks don't want to be someplace else. They want to be there. They work in seafood processing, they work in shipbuilding, they work in retail, and they want to be in the area, and that helps them stabilize their family and have a good quality of life. The third thing, Bayou La Batre has a very valuable housing resource that can assist families in need of affordable housing due to displacement from disasters, and the creation of the Bayou La Batre Housing Authority assures this facility will be sustained for the foreseeable future. It is only because of strong leadership by Stan Wright and the members of the City Council, and I don't stroke them because they're my boss, but because they have done a lot of hard work, and there weren't clear answers at the beginning. We didn't know this would work. You can build this, but you cannot force people to live here. That is a question that is pretty daunting when you just look at a set of plans. Even though it looks nice, it may not be what you want. You have to understand the cultural heritage and the way people live and what their needs are. And thank goodness we had some folks that knew that. The development team, and this is very important, want to ring a bell or put up a sign or something. The development team that includes grants administration, legal, engineering, and construction professionals with federally funded housing development experience is absolutely mandatory. If you have people that are going to lead these projects, I know I'm preaching to the choir some ways, but if they're going to be the people in charge that are going to make these projects happen, they need these kinds of experiences. And I'm at the end of my career, so I'm not trying to gin up new business. But that is absolutely something that needs to be done, and I think it probably ought to be put in the project guidance for states. I don't know if they'd listen, but maybe so. I think the last thing is that we need an empathy for people in need that compels one to listen, even when the complaint is more an expression of frustration with the present and anxiety about the future, rather than sometimes a request for a practical solution. These people are going through a tremendous change. As I said earlier, I don't know how I would survive spending 1,500 nights in a FEMA trailer. And I don't have any great aspersion for FEMA trailers, but it is a difficult situation, and we have great empathy for these people, and hopefully this will, for now and for a long time, provide them some reasonable and affordable housing.
Good afternoon. I'm Vince LaCoste, engineer with Polysurveying. We provided most of the design services. We had some sub-consultants, architect on board, but other than that, we handle most of it in-house. Before I get started on this, Bob was talking about his woe list, and that just made me think of one of the ones, and Ken, hopefully you weren't going to use this one, but I get all these emails, that come in every time there's a complaint, and we all get them, and one of them said that there was no bathroom sink, that when they moved in, the sink wasn't there, the sink was missing. So I'm like, my Lord, I walked through this thing, how in the world did we miss there not being a bathroom sink? And so, we get the Mitchell company home and say, you guys, y'all got to get down there. There's not a sink in this house. And so they get down there and they walk in the bathroom, and there's a big box up on the counter, and they pick the box up and move it out of the way and say, ma'am, there's your sink. So that's some of the stuff we deal with, but it was there. Bob went over most of these, but here's the kind of the key people. The mayor, Craig Bryant, is one of the principals at Polysurveying with me. He lives in Bayou La Batre and was displaced, had 4 foot of water in his home, and he was one of the fortunate ones that had means to rebuild and do what he needed to do, and was back in his home in no time. And Bayou La Batre is a pretty poor community, and that's was the exception, not the rule. The majority of people spent a lot of time in FEMA trailers. There was myself, Tim Spafford, architect that we had, and then of course Janie and Bob and Felicia and James, and that's all the management and engineering staff. And then we dealt with Gulf Equipment to build the infrastructure, and then Mitchell Company and Ken for the homes. Just to kind of give you a rough overview, I think y'all all know where Alabama is, and you might not all know where Mobile is, but that's roughly it. That's state of Alabama. Highlighted beneath there on the state map is Mobile County, and then the little red dot down there at the base of Mobile County is Bayou La Batre right there. This is City of Mobile. Just got to give you an idea of where we're at here. Again, we all got to have this hurricane picture, but you can see there's Bayou La Batre basically right there. And some of the same pictures Bob had, showing the destruction. When we started looking for a site, again, we wanted it to not be in a flood zone, to be contiguous to the city so it could be annexed. There were no pre-existing FEMA sites available, and one of the big keys when we were looking at alternate sites was, can we get water and sewer there? And that kind of ruled out a few places and left us here at Safe Harbor. This is just a quad map, and this is where most of the people of Bayou La Batre lived, where all the destruction occurred, and this is where Safe Harbor is. It's up at the north end of the city. It's everything on the site's greater than 75. It goes up to around 85 elevation from one end to the other. And most of this was less than elevation 10. So by moving up the road, we've got to a place that's out of harm's way a little further. That's kind of a zoom in of the site there. You can see the 75 contour and everything above that goes uphill. This is Safe Harbor Estates. This is Safe Harbor Landing. Safe Harbor Estates had larger lots, and Safe Harbor Landing had a little bit smaller lots. And Shine Road was an existing dirt road that was brought in and paved, and this is 188, which is a state road that we did some improvements with turn lanes and stuff for the increased traffic. That's just out of the code book, basically the mile per hour zones that are required for designing homes. 150's out here where you're hitting the tip of Dolphin Island. 145 here, kind of mostly in Bayou La Batre. And this is our site, you know, probably 142, 143 would be the design. These were all designed for 150 on this site. This is an aerial view showing where we took basically the raw land and laid out the lots, laid out the subdivision. You know, got a large detention pond area here, a detention pond area over here. And again, this is 188, and this was just a dirt road right here that's been improved all the way to the end of our project. This is under construction, a shot of Safe Harbor Estates. This is kind of shot from the northwest, looking back towards the southeast. And this is where Safe Harbor Landing would be built after the estates was built. But this is during road construction. And this was our kind of base map for estates. Anything that's colored has a house on it right now except for the red. Those were set aside for, you know, firefighters, policemen, that, you know, they could have a place at a reduced price to stay. This, you know, the green are park areas that we'll talk about a little bit later. These blue are detention, but the yellow were 2 bedrooms, the orange are 3 bedrooms, the gray are 4 bedrooms, and these that have an asterisk on them, I think there's maybe 6 of them in the whole subdivision, were built for UFAS compliance with ramps and, you know, all the necessary UFAS items for handicap accessibility. This is Safe Harbor Landing, same you know, color coding system, with the exception of these here are single wide units. Still 2 bedrooms, with the exception of these with the asterisk. They are single 1 bedroom handicap accessible units. This is a rendering kind of showing it all put together with amenity areas that I'll go into a little bit later, what we're doing to provide amenities for the you know, the kids and the residents. This is a shot of our basically finished road. We ended up with nice wide roads, 23 foot of pavement, you know, curb and gutter, 5 foot sidewalks all through the subdivision, ramps, crosswalks, fully handicap accessible. It's pretty flat out there, so we didn't have any steep grades to deal with. Some more pictures of the streets. We did, like Bob mentioned, it was originally, we were so tight on money. Our first bid came in over. We had to rebid, and thankfully we ended up, by making some of the changes, we were able to sod these yards. We had initially pulled that out and was going to seed, and that would have been a mess with all the rain we got during this project. This is one of the entrances to Safe Harbor Estates. There, we've just awarded a contract for all the landscaping and amenity packages that'll dress the entrance up. This is one of the little park areas that's located kind of off the picture here in this area, and we provided some parking areas there so that the residents could hop in their vehicle if they wanted to and go down there and have a place to park. This is actually Shine Road right here, which was the dirt road, which got paved. Curb and gutter is part of the project. All the utilities are underground. And this is out on Highway 188. The state road that Shine Road comes off of, and we had to put in turn lanes to provide safe access. This is looking south, you know, left turn lane in. This is what we started with. This is not what we ended up with. When we first were advertising for bids, we had our architect, you know, do these conceptual drawings to give to the bidders, which would basically use these rough guidelines to submit a proposal to us. And you know, these were pretty large. I think we were shooting a little too big here. We had 1,333 square foot living in the 2 bedroom. And after the bids came back over and we had to regroup, we met with the bidders. We said, you know, guys, what can we do to get down to where we need to be and still have some contingency money left? We ended up with this floor plan.